Hello, my name is Andy and I am the Village Idiot. I'm armed with a car and a GoPro and an unhealthy amount of time on my hands. I'm using that time to attempt to visit every civil parish in England. You're watching the Newark and Sherwood series, a district of 84 civil parishes right in the centre of Nottinghamshire. Come with me as we delve into one of them. Welcome back to Newark and Sherwood, everybody. Now today's start point, as you can see, is a church which is right next to a village hall. They're sort of sited close to each other. There's a war memorial to see over there as well, and also a phone box, and we'll be heading down towards the River Trent to start this one off. Welcome to the lovely village and parish of Hoveringham. This Newark and Sherwood video is sponsored by Past Days, a family history blog by June Terrington. You'll find a link in the description. Here's my disclaimer for people who may be watching me for the first time. I say things as I would in my native accent and dialect. As a result, I may not pronounce things in the same way as the locals do. Remember, I'm a visitor. It's impossible to know everything. Leave me a comment, spin me a like, and bash that subscribe button. Let's get to today's parish video. Welcome back to Newark and Sherwood, folks. Today we're in Hoveringham. You'll find this one between Caythorpe and Thurgarton. Once again, we're on the banks of the River Trent, although this is the last time we'll be seeing that river for a while, until we get to Newark at least. For many years, Hoveringham was an important village for sand and gravel extraction. There are many lagoons around the village, particularly to the north, where both commodities were quarried. Gravel extraction was started in this area in 1939 by the Hoveringham Gravel Company, which was taken over in 1982 by Tarmac. The company had a very distinctive logo, that of a woolly mammoth, which has now become a symbol synonymous with the entire village. We'll explain why in this video. The village is comprised of 3 roads: Main Street, Gonalston Lane and Boat Lane, and most of its houses line those roads. There are some impressive ones amongst them, let me tell you. Hoveringham sits 11 miles away from Nottingham and 5 miles away from Southwell. Amongst its attractions, there's a pub called the Reindeer. It used to have another called the Elm Tree Hotel, which had quite a history and has some tales to tell as well. There was also a third called the Marquis of Granby. The village can also boast one of the oldest cricket clubs in Nottinghamshire too. Lots to see here then. Let's get on with it, and let's see Hoveringham. We begin at the village hall on Gonalston Lane. This consists of 2 rooms, the Minkley Room and the main hall. The Minkley Room was built in 1845, originally as a chapel school. The main hall came later in 1907, originally for use as a men's institute. It cost some £978 to build. On the main door you can see a woolly mammoth, a Hoveringham symbol. The remains of one were found by the Hoveringham Gravel Company when they began gravel extraction here in 1939. Next is the church dedicated to St Michael and All Angels, a small building in the early French Gothic style, built in 1848. It stands on the site of at least 2 former churches. The original was believed to have been one of the most ancient in the county of Nottinghamshire. Amongst the graves in the churchyard is the final resting place of Joseph Baines, who died in 1904. Keep him in mind, we'll come back to him later. And just outside the church you've got the war memorial here. Nice little marble tablet. which tells you all about the men who served here from this village, right in front of the church. Okay, now we're going to go to the left and head down towards the River Trent. So now we're making our way down towards the River Trent. One last thing to see on Gonalston Lane first though, and that would be the old red phone box. And here it's a book exchange. This is Boat Lane, which runs down to the river. It's called Boat Lane because this is where Hoveringham Ferry was once located. It's mainly residential down here, apart from this sewage pumping station. Delightful. Hoveringham historically has been known to flood thanks to the Trent. That's how it gets its name. Hoveringham literally means settlement of the hump dwellers. It was high ground within the River Trent's floodplain. And here is the Trent. Amongst its many tales in this part of the world is that of George Seymour, a dredgerman who in 1949 discovered an unexploded World War II bomb in the river. It was to be declared harmless, but at the time he wasn't to know. He would alert the authorities by calling them from our next landmark. Well, the Trent is looking quite peaceful and calm today. It's very different in other places along the Trent as we've seen before. Now, the next thing we need to talk about is that building that's right behind me. That used to be a pub called the Elm Tree, and it's got some interesting tales to tell. Earlier we learned about Joseph Baines. He was one of the innkeepers at the Elm Tree Hotel. The pub was run by the Baines family but was actually owned by Trinity College, Cambridge. The Elm Tree was often frequented by visitors. Within easy reach of Loudham Station, it was a popular destination for a day trip from Nottingham or from Newark. But Hoveringham has had travellers from much further afield than that. The Elm Tree has played host to people from New York, New Zealand, India, France and Italy in its time too. It must have been popular. Now we're walking along Lodgefield Lane, a private road, but also a public footpath. It will take us in a moment through this field towards Main Street. I thought these horses were going to come and say hello, but it turns out they were uninterested. The path crosses a small beck on its way back into the village. There's a couple of these around the village, and they all end up in the Trent eventually. Okay, so now we've hit Hoveringham's main street, and we will be heading south primarily here, but I just want to go to the north for a short distance, because there's some interesting properties up here, one in particular which caught my eye. These buildings all form part of the impressive Hoveringham Hall, which for generations has been occupied by the Nall family. The Nalls hold a baronetcy, which was created in 1954 for Joseph Nall, a Conservative MP. The title is currently held by his grandson, Sir Edward Nall. Lady Helen Nall, his wife, was to provide the village with a very interesting piece of wartime research a few years ago. I'll get to that in today's special section. Heading south now, here's a notable postbox. This one's from the time of George V. It stands at the entrance to the Chapel Field, otherwise known as Hoveringham's Children's Play Area. This is a decent size and has plenty of play equipment. Hoveringham's main playing field is the base of the cricket club. From here we can get a look at the old National School, which was built in 1851. This later became the parochial school. Okay, so I'm back to pretty much the same spot as I was in last time I spoke to the camera. This time we're heading to the south, and the first landmark of interest here is the old post office. There are many old buildings along Main Street. Some have inevitably been renovated and made into very desirable residences. Some were shops. Hoveringham once had a general shop and post office, which was located in Post Office Yard. There was also a bakery too, which closed down some years prior. The Reindeer is still here though. This is the second of the two pubs that's been taken over by the talented London chef Michael Carr, the same man who we mentioned at the Old Vol in Caythorpe. Since his arrival, this has been transformed into a popular little country pub. Behind this is Hoveringham Cricket Club. It's not known with any certainty when exactly the cricket club was founded, but it was definitely before 1803. That makes them one of the oldest clubs in Nottinghamshire. It currently has 3 teams, and the first 11 once achieved 8 consecutive league promotions, which is a record. So how typically English is this? You've got the cricket pavilion over there, which is in touching distance of the Reindeer. How good is that? You can sit with a pint and watch the cricket. Whilst we've already mentioned the tale of George Seymour and his unexploded bomb, Hoveringham also has another big piece of wartime history. If you walk to the east along the bank of the river, you'll come to a memorial. This is Hoveringham's Lancaster Bomber Memorial. In the final months of World War II, the 12th and the 29th of January 1945 to be precise, 2 Lancaster bombers crashed in fields close to Hoveringham with the loss of both of the crews. Over 6 decades later, Lady Helen Nell unexpectedly came across a fragment of aircraft alloy in one of her husband's fields. After talking to a local farmer who remembered the incident, Lady Helen was able to track down the families of the aircrews and piece together the final moments of the 2 Lancasters. It inspired her to write a book called Courage of the Small Hours, which goes into great detail as to how the war affected Hoveringham and the surrounding villages. Okay, we've reached the junction of Boat Lane, Main Street and Gonalston Lane. There's a few other houses in between the cricket club and here, one of which is the Manor House, which is that big impressive white house you can see behind me. Another one is Southfield Lodge, which is on the other side. I have taken a couple of shots of those. They'll be in the rest of section. You can see behind me a bus stop. The number 300 stops here. That's what serves the village. And also there's a parish notice board. And this, I don't know whether you can read it from here, but on the bottom it says, celebrating the Platinum Jubilee of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, 1952 to 2022. So it's a brand new notice board, and one of these is going on it. And that is Hoveringham in the books. I'm not quite finished with this place yet though, because I'm now going to put the camera on the dashboard and drive out towards Gonalston, where there's a few other bits and bobs to talk about. So to finish, we're taking a drive north towards Gonalston. In doing so, we'll pass through the area where the Hoveringham Gravel pits were located. The pits are either side of this road. You probably won't be able to see much. I can't really stop to show them for you though, because there's no designated parking area close to the pits. Much like the ones in Girton, Hoveringham's pits have been flooded and are now used for a variety of water-based activities. One of them is called the Sailing Pit, for obvious reasons, and the other 2 are named the Railway Pit and the New Workings. All of them are good for bird watching. Of course, fishing is a popular activity on the lakes as well. Here's the railway. There's no station here, but that's the Nottingham to Lincoln line, once again seen on the channel. And once we hit this crossroads, we're out of Hoveringham and we're heading into Gonalston. I've been Andy, also known as the Village Idiot, and I'm out.